When do you make your decision?
Soon. We're heading in the direction of making a decision within the next month or two. And I've been traveling the country, trying to get the message out there and decide, is there a unique message in the Republican Party that resonates? And I think there is.
Where are you on term limits?
Absolutely. I'm an endorser of the constitutional amendment. I've signed on to it. It's one of the first bills that I helped introduce when I came to Washington. Absolutely for it. In fact, I'm coming to believe that maybe we ought to have term limits on federal judges as well and have them reconfirmed every so often.
Will you run on it?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's unique.
It's a big issue. It's a big issue, and I've believed in term limits. I first started supporting them when I was a resident at Duke University in North Carolina. I was in favor of term limits. It was one of the votes we judged in the state legislature.
And for the people who say, hey, listen, some of these lawmakers are pretty good at what they do, why wouldn't we want to keep them there?
It's not a specific argument against one legislator. It's an argument for change.
Libertarians often talk about how we need to retreat from the Middle East, to stop provoking our enemies there. Do you agree?
My point of view is that the most important thing we do is national defense, bar none. I think if I'm looking at spending for national defense, it's my priority. It's what I would spend money on over every other consideration in Washington. As far as where we're involved, I think there's a spectrum. The spectrum is from we're never anywhere around the world to we're everywhere all the time. And I'm not for never being anywhere. We do have to defend ourselves, but it doesn't always mean every war is the appropriate war to be in.
So speaking of spectrums, are you closer to the Bush policy on the Middle East or the Obama policy on the Middle East?
I think when you look at that spectrum, from being nowhere to being everywhere, I think we headed towards being everywhere too much. And I would say pulling back would be to where Eisenhower was, to where Reagan was, and the first George Bush. And so what I would say is that I've been a big critic of the president's foreign policy with regard to Libya, with regard to Benghazi, with regard to Syria. So I don't really have much in common at all with the president's foreign policy.
Paul supporters, some of them were a part of Occupy Wall Street a few years ago. Do you think movement libertarians have more in common with the Occupy crowd or establishment Republicans?
I think the interesting thing, and I've often made the comparison between Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, is they both sort of originated out of some of the same themes. For example, one of the reasons I got involved in politics in 2009 is I was mad at Republicans for bailing out the big banks. So were some of the Occupy Wall Street. But I've told people what the difference is between the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street is. Tea Party cleaned up their mess and went to work on Monday.
How do you run in the Republican Party against what likely will be a Hillary Clinton nomination that will also likely tap into women's issues and being a woman and cracking that glass ceiling? Is there a way that effectively run against that?
Well, one of the segments of women where we don't do very well is young single women. We actually win the married women vote. Nobody ever mentions it, but married women vote more for Republicans than Democrats. Young single women vote, though, vastly more for Democrats.
Janet Yellen, chairman of the Federal Reserve, said she vigorously opposes an audit of the Fed. Why do you think so?
The Fed's a creation of Congress. The Constitution gave us the power to coin money, and we gave up some of that power to an independent branch. But I think what's unseemly about the Fed doing an all-out full-court press against me and against legislation is that they have the monopoly on the money. They should be, because they're given such great power, they should be forbidden from involving in politics. They shouldn't be involved in politics at all.